Today we're going to be talking about fund tokenization.
Yeah,
So using blockchain to basically revolutionize how we invest.
that's right.
And, I don't even know where to begin
hmm
because this could be like the next
Yeah,
big thing in asset management.
it could be. It's like the next evolution, I think. I mean, you think about it, you had mutual funds, then there were ETFs.
Right.
This is the next thing.
To the next, yeah.
This is the third revolution.
And we're talking about unlocking billions of dollars in additional returns for investors.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a white paper from Boston Consulting Group, Aptos Labs, and Invesco.
Yeah.
We've got some marketing materials as well, all kind of saying the same thing, which is that this is going to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm,
So before we get into any of the details,
Yeah.
can you just break it down for me? What is fund tokenization?
Sure, yeah. So I think the easiest way to think about it is, those old school stock certificates?
Yeah.
Where it's like a piece of paper that says you own a piece of the company.
Yeah.
It's basically like a digital version of that. But instead of owning a piece of a company, you own a piece of a fund.
Got it.
So it's a digital representation of your ownership in a fund. And the cool thing is, because it's on a blockchain, it can be traded 24/7.
So that's kind of like taking those old school paper certificates, which, I mean, these days we never even see. We just kind of know that they exist somewhere.
Exactly.
Bringing them into the digital age.
Yeah.
You can see them. You can trade them.
You can trade them anytime you want, yeah.
So why should our listeners care?
Well, the white paper estimates that if every single mutual fund globally was tokenized, investors could see an additional $100 billion in annual returns.
Oh,
And those who are able to kind of play the intraday fluctuations, they could see an extra $400 billion.
oh my gosh.
So the potential is massive.
Those numbers are huge. I'm like
Mm.
having trouble wrapping my head around where those extra returns are coming from.
Yeah, so I think it's really all about efficiency. You're eliminating a lot of the friction in the traditional investment process. So you're cutting out middlemen, you're automating a lot of the administrative work, and that allows more value to flow directly to the investors.
So it's not that you're creating new value.
Right.
It's that you're getting rid of the things that were blocking it.
Exactly. You're unlocking that value that was always there, but that was kind of stuck in the system.
Wow. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
We're just talking about mutual funds, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what about hedge funds, private equity, real estate?
Oh, yeah. The potential is even bigger when you start to factor in all those other types of funds.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm.
I can see how this is getting people excited. So the white paper talks about benefits for both investors and financial institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's break those down. Like, what are the advantages that investors can look forward to?
Well, I think the biggest one is that 24/7 trading we talked about. So you're no longer limited by market hours. Then there's fractional ownership, so you can buy tiny pieces of funds instead of having to purchase whole shares.
So it's kind of like opening up access to people who might not have been able to afford it before.
Exactly. And then there's also lower barriers to entry, because of the reduced administrative costs.
Right. It's all streamlined.
Yep. It's streamlined and more efficient. And then there's even the possibility of instant collateralization.
What does that mean?
So imagine being able to use your tokenized fund shares as collateral for loans or other financial products.
Oh, wow.
And this could all happen in real time.
Okay. So it's like, we always hear about ETFs being
Yeah.
the more efficient, better way to invest.
Right.
It's kind of like EPFs on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. It's like taking the best parts of ETFs and making them even better.
I got to ask, though, are they really that similar? Or are there some, hidden gotchas that we should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there are some differences, and it's important to understand those, but we'll get into those later. First, I want to talk about the benefits for financial institutions.
Okay, let's do that. What's in it for them? Why are they so eager to jump on this?
Well, for one, they get access to a whole new pool of investors, especially younger generations who are already comfortable with digital assets.
So it's a way for them to stay relevant, keep up with the times.
Exactly. And it also allows them to streamline their offerings and reduce their administrative burdens. It's all about efficiency.
Right. Less paperwork, less hassle.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe it'll even lead to the creation of entirely new products and services.
Okay, so it sounds like a win-win for everybody. But, I mean, we can't just ignore the downsides.
Yeah.
I know you said we'd talk about them later.
Right.
But let's at least acknowledge that they exist, right?
Cool.
And every new technology comes with its own set of risks and challenges.
Of course.
So what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about?
Well, security is a big one. We're talking about people's money here. So making sure these systems are secure is absolutely paramount.
Right.
And then there's the whole regulatory landscape. This is still a pretty new area. So we need clear guidelines to protect investors and make sure the market is stable.
So it's not just about the technology itself. It's about how it fits into the existing system and how we make sure it's used responsibly.
Exactly. And then there's also the potential for market manipulation, just like with any other asset. So we need to be thinking about ways to prevent that.
Okay. These are all good points. I think it's really helpful to remind ourselves that technology isn't always a magic bullet.
Right.
It doesn't just solve all of our problems. There's always, these complex issues that we need to address.
Absolutely.
So before we move on and talk about what this might all look like in the future, let's just do a quick recap of what we've covered so far.
Okay, so we started by talking about what fund tokenization is, which is basically using blockchain technology to turn shares of a fund into digital tokens.
Right.
Then we talked about the potential benefits for both investors and financial institutions.
Like 24/7 trading, fractional ownership.
Exactly. Lower barriers to entry, potentially instant collateralization.
Yep.
Lots of exciting stuff.
And then we took a step back and said, hey, wait a minute. We need to think about the risks, too.
Yep.
Things like security, regulation, potential for market manipulation.
Right.
We got to be realistic.
We have to.
Okay. So with that foundation in place, let's shift gears and talk about the future. Is this just a theoretical concept, or are there already signs that this is gaining traction? That's what we'll be exploring next.
Absolutely. Welcome back to the deep dive.
So before the break, we were talking about some pretty impressive numbers when it comes to the potential returns from tokenized funds.
Yeah, $100 billion for mutual funds, $400 billion for savvy investors, and that's not even counting the other kinds of funds.
Right. And you said that was based on, a pretty conservative estimate.
Yeah, those figures are based on how fast ETFs took off, which is pretty quick.
Okay.
But the white paper actually suggests that tokenized funds could grow to over $600 billion in AUM by 2030.
Wow, so even more than ETFs.
Potentially, yeah.
And you said that's conservative. What's a more aggressive projection?
Well, the white paper suggests if regulators allow existing mutual funds and ETFs to just directly convert into tokenized funds, then we could be looking at trillions of dollars.
Trillions.
Within the next decade, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So this is a total game changer.
It could be, yeah.
But that makes it even more important to get the regulations right.
Absolutely. Clear regulations will build trust with investors, and it'll attract institutional investors, which is what we need for this market to really take off.
Right, because right now it's kind of like the Wild West out there.
A little bit, yeah.
But before we go too deep on regulation, I want to circle back to something you mentioned before the break, which was the flywheel effect. You were saying that the adoption of stablecoins could actually accelerate the growth of tokenized funds.
Yeah.
Can you explain how that works?
Sure. So as more and more people use stablecoins for their everyday transactions, like, buying stuff, paying bills, they'll become more comfortable with digital assets in general.
Right.
And that paves the way for wider adoption of things like tokenized funds.
So it's like stablecoins are kind of a gateway drug
Kind of, yeah.
to the world of on-chain investments.
Exactly.
I like that analogy.
And then as more institutions start seeing the potential here, they're going to start demanding more stablecoin-based settlement options, which further boosts the whole stablecoin ecosystem.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
It's a positive feedback loop.
Yeah, a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Okay, so lots of potential for growth, exciting new technology, but let's bring it back down to the individual investor.
Okay.
What are the key advantages that our listeners should be thinking about?
Well, we already talked about 2047 trading, which is huge.
Right, no more waiting for the market to open or close.
Exactly. Fractional ownership, so you can buy tiny pieces of funds.
Okay.
Much more accessible for smaller investors.
So it's not just for the wealthy anymore.
Nope, anyone can get in on the action.
Love that. What about fees?
Fees are likely to be much lower with tokenized funds.
Why is that?
Because you're cutting out a lot of the middlemen and automating a lot of the processes.
So those savings get passed on to the investor.
Exactly.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
And remind me again about instant collateralization.
Right. So this is still a bit speculative because it depends on regulations. But imagine being able to use your tokenized fund shares as collateral for a loan.
Okay.
And it all happens instantly.
So you're basically making your investments work harder for you.
That's the idea.
Okay, so lots of advantages, potential for growth, but we can't forget about the challenges.
Right.
Like we talked about regulation, but is there anything else?
Yeah, I think awareness is a big one.
Like people just not knowing about this.
Yeah, a lot of people, even experienced investors, just haven't heard of tokenized funds yet.
So there's a lot of education that needs to happen,
Absolutely.
which is, part of what we're trying to do here with this show.
Exactly.
All right, we're almost out of time for this part of the deep dive.
Okay.
What should we leave our listeners thinking about?
I'd say the key takeaway here is that tokenized funds have the potential to be as transformative as the internet was.
Wow, that's a big statement.
It is, but I think it's true.
I mean, both are built on the idea of decentralization,
Right.
but we're still in the early days, there's still a lot of uncertainty.
For sure, but that's what makes it so exciting.
Okay, well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break.
Sounds good.
When we come back, we'll explore what this potential revolution means for you, the investor, and how you can prepare for this exciting new era of finance. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into tokenized funds. And, we've talked about what they are. We've talked about the potential benefits, the risks, the role of stable coins, all that stuff. But now I want to get down to brass tacks. What does this mean for me, the investor? Should I be running out to buy tokenized funds right now?
Well, it's definitely tempting, right? I mean, those returns we were talking about are pretty mind-blowing.
Right. So no more beating around the bush. What's your take? Time to go all in.
I wouldn't say all in just yet. I mean, it's still early days. There are a few things that need to happen before we can really say that this is the next big thing.
Okay, so what are those things? What are the make or break factors that investors should be paying attention to?
Well, first and foremost, we need regulatory clarity. We've talked about it a lot already, but it's really crucial. Governments around the world need to establish clear guidelines for how tokenized funds should operate.
So you're talking about rules of the road, making sure everyone's playing by the same rules.
Exactly. And that will not only protect investors, but it'll also give institutions the confidence they need to really invest in this space.
Right, because right now it's kind of this gray area, and nobody wants to be the first one to make a big move.
Exactly. And then we also need global standards. So things like data formats, security protocols, even the underlying blockchain technology itself. We need to make sure that everyone's speaking the same language, so to speak.
So we don't end up with a fragmented market where different platforms can't talk to each other.
Right, we want to avoid that. And then finally, we need technical interoperability. So the ability for different blockchain platforms to communicate with each other seamlessly.
So it's if you could only send emails to people who use the same email provider as you, email wouldn't be nearly as useful.
Exactly. We need to create an interconnected ecosystem where assets can flow freely between different platforms.
Okay, so we've got regulatory clarity, global standards, and technical interoperability. Those are the big three.
Yep, those are the key ingredients for success.
All right, so let's say all of those things fall into place. What then are we talking about, a total financial revolution?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, this could really change the way we think about investing, but it's important to remember that it's still a journey. There are going to be bumps along the road.
So what's your advice for listeners who are itching to get involved right now? Should they be dipping their toes in the water or just wait and see?
I'd say proceed with cautious optimism. Don't go all in just yet, but definitely start learning about the space. Do your research, understand the risks, maybe make a small investment just to get a feel for how things work.
So educate yourself. Start small. Be prepared for a bumpy ride.
It's exactly.
Okay, well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
Yeah, there's a lot more to explore.
But, that's what makes it so exciting is we're on the cusp of something really big.
It really does feel that way.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder.
Okay.
If tokenized funds do become as big as ETFs, as some people are predicting, what does that mean for the rest of the financial world? Which industries are going to be disrupted? Which new players are going to emerge? What unexpected consequences might we see?
Those are great questions. And honestly, I don't think anyone has all the answers yet. But that's what makes this so fascinating, right? We're all figuring this out together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the world of tokenized funds.
My pleasure.
We hope you learned something new. And as always, stay tuned for more deep dives into the future of finance.